Hello everyone. I would like to first present the interactivity framework. So, my topic was on measuring interactivity of learning resources, and I built in this research paper. I combined two different aspects: the cognitive load that I will get later into, and other qualitative and quantitative measures in UX experience and user interfaces of those elements, combining it into an equation and a model one can discuss and weight and adjust the different factors that I mentioned in a way that is practical and that can measure interactivity that I will get into now. The second slide, introduction. So I will first get into what is interactivity with the different aspects. I talked about the qualitative, quantitative, and the process definition, which kind of emerged. Then the coming of the model, the main factor I talked about, and an example usage of the equation and how this paper recommends in measuring interactivity and with the combination of those research papers, which I will get into now. So in the 1960s were the first definitions of interactivity. It is still a really ambiguous definition. So we all kind of know what interactivity is. So we can say that something is interactive if it has a positive affect to it. So interactivity, we know there are also studies in marketing psychology that helps in telling that interactivity improves the experience and also has kind of a fun aspect to it. It is something that is interchangeable, so there are definitions that go into more detailed aspects, for example, a two-way communication of two mediums. So in this case, we are looking at learning resources. So there is a digital device, a computer, and a human in play. Interactivity also could be that the digital media is a mediator in between and there are two humans speaking. So there's also interaction, as the definition already says. And interactivity is something when you use the medium and that you can like influence it, and there's is change in it. So that's the process aspect. And that change is something that the person initiates, and in a communicative way or in a non-communicative way. So with in the digital age, we have the digital input devices, and we interact with those elements to input device, and those elements can be categorized. And the first approaches that we will get also into later, like in the next section even, are factors that can be categorized. So we know that. So what is interactivity? Here you see like low, medium, and high, kind of a sense of interactivity that we typically see. So on the low interactivity side, that are like those elements I talked about are typical of, for example, even more on the medium side, like videos, they are interactive, quizzes are interactive, and also low interactivity. Even if you just navigate the page, if you can click on links instead of just having static text, so that's not that interactive. We would say also with our definition, there's no communication apart. You're just looking at something, and this with your senses you are just reading something and not clicking, thinking, and changing the content. If you can click on links, so that increases the interactivity, as one can kind of emphasize. And the high interactivity would be things like mixed reality, virtual reality, and really a model that you don't also just see. There we already kind of can see the aspect of the cognitive load of mixed reality device, virtual devices, where there are many details, and if you can even have the possibility to change different parameters and like interacting with that object and seeing different things or having a guidance through it, that has an important impact. Getting back to the related work, there are also studies that show in virtuality that there is definitely a high cognitive load, depending if, for example, in medical or other applications, virtual reality applications, if it's not just, but the majority, like which percentage is system controlled or user controlled. So it was shown that a good and healthy mix, so there's not a high cognitive load, that a high interactivity potential within the application had an overall negative experience and impact on the perceived interactivity and generally the interactivity, like the practical interactivity that I really wanted to grasp with this model, that it really diminished, and that some system controlled aspects, so the possibility of interaction is kind of a bit limited, but in a healthy way, and we'll get to it. And yeah, the first studies before that were the so-called, I would say, really just qualitative. This is now, as you can see in this slide, ordinal interactivity levels, so from a low, medium, and high one. And for each one, you can kind of, this was a study by Eastern University, which tried to give a specific weight to those elements. They seemed like a bit arbitrary, but I tried to build upon this model and combining it with the so-called cognitive load that was shown in other studies, and combining this aspect in between. The next slide, the quantitative, we'll get into it. Here you can already see the difficulty now in this subject and in for measuring interactivity. You can really, it's good that on the technical side, we already know there are different HTML elements like hyperlinks, images, videos. The videos are more on the medium, you can say, and then like specific links and even like interactions, page up, page down, scroll. You can give it all a specific interactive value that we wanted to have and for measuring interactivity. And there are now these different metrics. So we maybe you remember from statistics class that the, let's say, lower scales and kind of that don't have much of a statistical meaning are like the qualitative scale that just have a category. For example, this is a hand, I have a hand here, I have some thumbs. There is no statistical meaning in those categories. But if you say that something is big and smaller, or in this case we always saw like low, medium, and high, and just go with small and tall, and with those scales, this is more ordinal, still on a qualitative scale. And my goal was also to grasp a model that is more on the metrical and quantitative scale. It's not that we saw in our last slide the elements with hyperlinks, for example, with a weight of 1, and then the interactivity page up, page down has a weight of 2. A metric scale would be like the most ideal version would be if you add like there's this kind of the dilemma that can you really say that a link is half as interactive as a page scroll, for example, like with the weight 1 or weight 2, or that the page scroll is as 2x times the interactivity factor of the hyperlink. And that's why previous research also had this problem with this kind of statistical measurements in incorporating these and even seeing if this makes sense. And I still find this really interesting and kind of important to try in figuring out in which sense a metric in quantitative scale can be incorporated in measuring interactivity. So in this kind, you see the balance act of the cognitive law aspect that I gave you. So this was also one of my first visualizations for the submission. You can see here the maximum cognitive load is something that could be recognized in the, for example, virtual reality study that I showed you, and that the technological features and the user experience contribute into the cognitive load of the user, and that should be in balance with the maximum cognitive load. That in this equation here, you see it's the TES optimal. So the technical features that seem optimal, and this number should really be calculated. This should be research in like further empirical studies with statistics to really validate this number, and then see like depending on the weights you choose at the different levels that I showed you. These are kind of arbitrary now, but you should those experiments, how should it look like? So if you must see with the user performance, so a practical interactivity equation should have really a practical based on empirical weights first, but that's something that is in discussion. So this equation quantifies the different weights of the applications. For example, here the TFS total is 65, so it could be a mix, like for example the weights. So for example, 2 videos, 1 images, and then like 5 links would be like this interactivity TFS total score of 65. It will be put in this exponential equation, which is also inspired by, as you can see in the next slide, a U curve. So this is, for example, now the optimal is like also 65, and then the highest like interactivity value is like 1 in this case. And then the sigma can be also adjusted, which is in the, you can see there squared, to adjust like how does the interactivity really suffer, like by which kind of value and height of interactivity value of, for example, a video, how much does it decrease after this optimal value, and also if it wasn't high enough, like how much is the velocity in which interactivity can be improved or diminished. And here you can also see, like, depending on which optimal value you choose, that it gives a certain room now for this model to be used in applications. This was it. Thank you for this, for your attention. I hope this gave you some food of thought, and we learned about the aspect of cognitive load and interactivity, and of the different elements that contribute in interactivity, and kind of thinking which which model and weights and what discussion is behind interactivity. Thank you very much.